China's use of the H-6 bomber in its state propaganda has intensified in recent years, especially through 2024 and into mid-2025. The H-6, originally a licensed copy of the Soviet Tu-16, has been heavily modernized in its latest variants, particularly the H-6K and H-6N, and is now portrayed in state media as a symbol of strategic deterrence and national technological prowess. However, the messaging significantly oversells the platform's actual capabilities. Recent Chinese propaganda focuses on the H-6's ability to carry and launch advanced standoff weapons, particularly the YJ-21, also referred to as KD-21 or Eagle Strike 21, and a large air-launched ballistic missile believed to be a variant of the DF-21. State broadcasts aired footage in early 2025 showing H-6K aircraft launching missiles over the South China Sea and during patrols near Taiwan. The visual presentation is designed for maximum psychological effect, edited with cinematic music, tight cuts of missile launches, and cockpit footage, while omitting any technical limitations or support requirements. A recurring theme in this propaganda is the bomber's role in encirclement missions around Taiwan. In one prominent case from early 2025, Chinese military media released a video narrated in Taiwanese Hokkien, showing H-6s patrolling the airspace east and south of Taiwan with messaging directed at the island's population. The underlying implication is that China has the capability to enforce a blockade or conduct a first strike, even though such operations would require massive coordination and face serious resistance from regional powers and advanced air defenses. Another element of the narrative is the so-called carrier killer image. The H-6N, with its ability to carry an ALBM under its fuselage, is often shown in Chinese media as a platform capable of disabling U.S. Navy carrier strike groups from long range. While it's true that these missiles have considerable range and speed, the targeting problem is more complex than presented. Successful use of such weapons depends heavily on space-based or over-the-horizon sensors to locate and track fast-moving naval targets, capabilities China is still working to fully develop and integrate. The bomber itself has no onboard targeting radar capable of identifying naval targets at those ranges, which is rarely acknowledged in domestic coverage. In addition, China has included the H-6 in joint patrol propaganda with Russia. In June 2025, Chinese and Russian bombers, including H-6Ns, and Tu-95s, were reported flying coordinated routes over the East China Sea and Sea of Japan. Chinese media highlighted these flights as evidence of growing strategic cooperation and regional dominance. However, the real purpose appears to be signaling and political posturing more than tactical capability. Such flights are monitored closely by Japan and South Korea and are escorted by US and allied fighters, which underscores the vulnerability of the H-6 in contested environments. Despite all the promotional attention, the H-6 remains an old platform with significant disadvantages that are never mentioned in official narratives. The airframe is based on a 1950s design with no internal weapons bay, meaning all munitions are carried externally, increasing drag and radar visibility. The aircraft is subsonic and lacks stealth features, making it easily detectable and potentially vulnerable to modern air defenses like the Patriot PAC-3, Aegis-equipped ships, or even fighter interceptors like the F-35 or F-15EX. Furthermore, the bomber's operational range is limited without aerial refueling. While newer H-6K variants can fly roughly 3,500 kilometers on internal fuel, longer-range missions, like strikes on Guam or U.S. Pacific bases, would require tankers. However, China's tanker fleet is relatively small and includes modified versions of the H-6 itself, the H-6U, which are less capable than dedicated platforms like the U.S. KC-135 or KC-46. Without sufficient tanker support, the strategic reach of the H-6 is more theoretical than practical. Moreover, Chinese state media often ignores the logistics and infrastructure required to support long-range bomber operations. The H-6 cannot operate independently over enemy territory. It requires electronic warfare escort, fighter coverage, satellite support for targeting, and well-defended staging bases. None of this is highlighted in domestic propaganda, which continues to show the H-6 as a sleek, autonomous force capable of striking targets thousands of kilometers away with precision. In reality, the H-6 is best suited for standoff strike missions within range of Chinese airspace or over contested areas where China can maintain air superiority. Its primary role is to serve as a missile truck, a platform for delivering long-range cruise or ballistic missiles without entering heavily defended airspace. While that still gives it value, especially in a first strike or intimidation context, the aircraft's limitations make it more of a deterrent and psychological tool than a frontline combat bomber on par with US or Russian strategic aviation. The focus on the H-6 in propaganda highlights how China uses older military platforms, when upgraded and carefully marketed, to project the image of a modern, high-tech military. It is less about actual combat performance and more about shaping perceptions in Taiwan, the South China Sea region, and among rivals like the United States. Through carefully controlled media, China continues to present the H-6 as a modern strategic asset, even though experts outside the country regard it as a transitional platform, useful for signaling but increasingly vulnerable in real conflict scenarios.